been asked by several people recently about my geckos, and the main question that I get is people are interested in them, they think they're cute, and then they want to keep one. Which gecko should I start with? And I have a crested gecko, a gargoyle gecko, and a leopard gecko. And there's some, I really don't think there's any cons to any of them, but there's a few things that people might want to consider. First of all, do you like the look of a lush tropical jungle setup? Because if you like that, or semi-tropical, then you're going to want to go with a gargoyle or a crested gecko. If you like more of a succulent type terrarium, an arid grassland, scrubland type setup, then you're going to want to go with a leopard gecko. So there's some pros and cons to each, but I'm going to get my geckos out here and introduce them to you. And we'll talk a little bit more about their care they're keeping in their environment while you can see them. So maybe that will help you decide which gecko is the best gecko for you to start with. This is Dobby. She is my leopard gecko. I've only had her since June, and I've been amazed at how fast she grew compared to my cresty and my gargoyle. Leopard geckos grow much, much faster. She's now 37 grams, so probably a little over halfway to her adult weight and fairly close to her adult length. And as you can see, she's absolutely adorable. She's tasting my skin with her tongue. They have a sort of bumpy skin. It's, fun to pet. And they can be, especially if you handle them pretty often, they are pretty calm. As you can see, she doesn't usually bolt. She did on me the other day, scared me. She almost jumped off my hand in midair while I was still standing, which is kind of freaky, but she doesn't usually do that. She's usually pretty calm, and she'll hang out and she will walk from hand to hand. She's sleepy right now because it's daytime. So all three of these geckos are more active starting at dawn or dusk, and then throughout the night as opposed to the daytime. So starting handling them after their tank lights go out, you usually see a lot more activity. She was sleeping up on her warm rock, and she's like, "Why are you disturbing me?" So adorable face, constantly smiling, eats insects. So that, from talking to folks, is the only negative, it's not for me personally, but that I can think of. If you don't want to have to keep insects or handle insects, then you can't have a leopard gecko because they only eat insects. I feed her primarily mealworms and crickets and phoenix worms and that sort of thing. So I've actually got a mealworm farm started, and I order crickets online. I could give you guys some resources in the links, but that's Dobby. That's what she looks like. And she, like I said, she's a little bit more than half her full size, and she's about 3.5 months old at this point. Say hello. All right, on to the crested and gargoyle geckos. This is River. She is my crested gecko. She is about 2 years old, and even though I've had her for quite a while now, she can still be a little jumpy, especially when you first get her out. Crested geckos are great. They've got these awesome crests. Their eyes look like they have eyelashes on them because of the crests over their eyes. And their scales are just, they're a little bumpy on the back. They're just incredibly soft. Even these pointy bits on their crest, you think they look pointy and sharp, but they're not. They're very, very soft. Crested geckos eat a fruit and insect powdered paste that you can buy as a powder, and you just add water to it, and they actually can just live on that. Now, neither my crested gecko nor my gargoyle gecko really likes to hunt crickets or anything, so I just end up feeding them I feed the Pangea Complete diet, and they are happy and healthy. They grow a little bit slower than if you give them bugs as well. But as you can see, handling her takes a lot of my attention because she is jumpier, literally jumpier. So she hasn't done any big jumps today, but sometimes still, even as a 2-year-old, she will kind of take large leaps off of one hand. And I can tell when she's doing it now that I'm ready. She sort of bunches her hind legs up, and I can get another hand out and catch her. But it takes more attention. And so especially if you're thinking of a gecko that you want to handle or have your child handle, cresteds are a little bit more challenging just from that aspect that they are quite good at jumping, and you have to know what to watch for and be prepared to catch them so they don't go flying off into midair and injure themselves. They do have decent aim, and once you get used to them, it's not that hard to, reach out your other hand and catch them. There's a little jump. But they also like, as you'll see in a second, they will climb to the highest point to feel safe, which also means that they will jump into your face if you point them at your face. It's only happened to me once so far. And try to climb your head pretty much every time. But, I mean, it's worth it. Look at how cute her face is. So yes, and I will show you her enclosure in a minute, but semi-tropical setup, easy care, fruit paste that you mix up every other day and leave out unless they eat it all. But just a little tiny bit, like in a Gatorade or a small sauce cup cap for an adult, and you can use like a water bottle cap for a baby just because they don't eat that much. And then mist their enclosure every day, every other day, depending on your humidity. They need some humidity spikes towards their active time, which again is mostly at sunset or dusk to morning for their shedding purposes. Now she is actually partially fired. I'll see if I can add in a picture of when she's completely fired up. Geckos, both gargoyles and crested geckos, can change their color, and they can go from fairly pale, there we go, no jumping off me, to fairly dark, and she's sort of halfway at the moment. She can get very dark brown, and then the lighter parts turn orange. So the sort of olivey parts of her skin, what you can see now, turn dark brown, and the sort of tan parts turn pretty orange. So she's interesting. She almost never fully fires up though, whereas my gargoyle gecko is almost always fully fired up, and when you see her not, it's really kind of weird. All right, so this is River, and now we'll go get the gargoyle gecko. Say bye-bye, River. This is Stormy, short for Stormageddon, Dark Lord of all, for all of you Doctor Who fans out there, only she turned out to be the Dark Lady of all. But I named her when she was a 5-gram baby. That's how big she was when she was shipped to me. And now she is, I need to weigh her again, but about 27 or 28 grams. And she is a little over a year old and still not fully grown. So that's the thing is about cresties and gargoyle geckos, is that they grow far slower than leopard geckos, because Dobby is about, I just weighed her the other night, she's 36 grams already. And so she's only a little bit smaller than River, who took till she was almost 2 to pass 37 grams. And will still probably get a little bit bigger, probably get to about 40. Leopard geckos get a little bit bigger overall. They'll get to about 50 or 60 grams usually, or more if she's got some of the bigger genes in her, which I don't really know because she was actually a pet store find. This little gal I got from a breeder. I just fell in love with her as a baby, had to have her, so I got her a year ago for my birthday, and she's a little over a year old. She hatched in July. Gargoyle geckos, particularly as they get older, are far less jumpy than crested geckos. So if you're leaning towards the more semi-tropical, forest, lush-looking environment for the tank, and you don't want to feed bugs, or you just think they look cool, they have some of the coolest eyes of any reptile that I've ever seen. They have these very white eyes with black veins in them, and the contrast is amazing. I'll have to see if I can add a close-up of one of her eyes to the video so that you can see, because I know you can't see that from there. But as you can see, she's a lot more chill. Now, sometimes she will get freaked and run up my arm, and occasionally she jumps, but she doesn't jump nearly as often as River does. Now, she doesn't like to be taken out, which is kind of funny, because she's a lot calmer when she's out. But usually after I handle her, which I only do every few days to check on her or weigh her, just because I know she doesn't really like it, she tends to go hide in a cork tube in her vivarium and not let me get her for a couple days. She'll actually hide like up in the cork tube with her face sticking out, and she waits until she's sure I'm going to bed. And if I open the tank to change her food or mist or whatever, she sort of just sneaks back up into the cork tube. But both gargoyle geckos and crested geckos are from New Caledonia, and so they're similar in size, and they're from the same type of region, so they basically need the same kind of care. They also have pretty soft scales. And then they have, instead of a crest, they have these little horns, which you can see developing on her head, or bumps, I guess. They're not really horns, but that's why they got their common name gargoyle gecko, because people thought they looked like gargoyles. I think she kind of looks like a little alligator, or maybe a tiny dragon, but you know, gargoyle geckos is what they got called. And as you see, now she is fully fired, so she is dark brown stripes with some burnt orange on her back in the stripes, and some little bit of yellow and orange going on in the side of her scales. So that is Stormy. Go put her back, and then we'll show you their enclosure. So I did a build video of this tank. That was before I had gotten the gecko. There's Dobby back in her house. She's not asleep back yet, but she's getting there. I didn't say this before, but neither gargoyles, geckos, or crested geckos have eyelids, so their eyes are open all the time. You can tell they're asleep because their pupil, the vertical slit in their pupil, is closed very tightly. Dobby is a leopard gecko, and they have eyelids. Their name actually means eyelid gecko, their scientific name. So here is her arid scrubland enclosure. They don't live on straight sand dunes or anything. They live on a hard clay, kind of packed soil in nature with grassy plants and other things that with a sort of a sedge grass. It's not a tree grass actually in the back, that can live in deserty, arid environments. And some of these plants, like the sedums, at least ones in their family, would actually be native to the Middle East, where Dobby is from. Leopard geckos live in Pakistan and Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, that area of the world, in the drier parts of those countries. So that is her desert enclosure. And the bowl in the middle actually has some mealworms left over from last night. I don't know if you can see any of them or not. I made that from art clay and sealed it with a non-toxic sealant so that it would blend in with her enclosure, and that's where I feed her mealworms. I do let her hunt crickets in the enclosure, but the mealworms stay contained in there for her to find because they tend to burrow and would disappear rather quickly. Here are Stormy and River's vivariums. They are 20-gallon fish tanks, the 20-gallon high size, and this is what's called a vertical conversion. I turned them on their side, and I have made a vertical opening, a vertical front. And you can hear our parakeet chirping madly in the background. He doesn't care when I'm doing videos. So they are both subtropical, pretty lush looking enclosures. River's enclosure has been planted for a little over a year, and so it is more grown in than Stormy's. And you can see down in the front is her food in just a little sauce cup. I've also used Gatorade lids when I've had some saved up, and I just mix a little bit up in the bottom of that, and that lasts her for 2 days. So she's got a water dish over there on the side. And these are local branches that I collected from one of our trees. We've lived on our property for over 10 years, and I know no pesticides or fertilizers or anything like that have been used for the tree to come in contact with. And during a storm, our slippery elm in the front has dropped, the bird is cracking me up right here, you guys, dropped some of its branches, and I dried them and used them in this enclosure. I made sure that they did not touch the dirt so that they would be less likely to rot, and they are holding up very well. And slippery elm is a reptile-safe wood. Now moving on over here to Stormy's tank. Her tank has been planted for about 5 months now, her adult tank. She was in a grow-out tank before this. That was also a fully planted vivarium. It was just a 10-gallon instead of a 20-gallon. And she has pretty much the same setup. You can see her water dish and her food cup. And for her tank, I didn't have any local wood on hand, so I purchased some manzanita from one of my suppliers and used that to create her climbing branches. I also made sure her cork tubes were open in this case because they were much wider than the cork tubes that I received for River's tank. And so she goes in that left one, and it's probably where she is now because I don't see her. She goes in that left one and she hides and stays there after she's mad at me for getting her out. So those are their tanks. Just side by side, 20 high vertical conversions. And yes, the padlocks are for my children. I don't want them to open the tanks when I am not around, and since they're very easy to do that and right at kid level, I took an additional precaution. I will say my kids have never tried to open them, but I did have a play date over the other day where one of the children over tried to open one of my front opening vivariums. So I was very glad I had taken this precaution and actually used a small little, it's just a luggage padlock, and I just keep the key up high, but it keeps the tank from being opened without me present.